This episode of The Unstarving Musician is powered by Bandzoogle, helping musicians around the world create professional artist websites. I somewhat recently moved my own artist website over to Bandzoogle. You can see it at robonzo.com. I'm a longtime WordPress user and website designer, so trying a system like Bandzoogle was kind of a big deal to me, but I know that WordPress ain't that easy to learn, and lots of musicians have no interest in learning how to use WordPress, but will try something purported to be easy to use. Well, it doesn't get much easier than Bandzoogle. I've talked about the numerous features they have at the front end of other episodes, but after talking to Dave Kuhl, VP of Business Development with Bandzoogle, I learned about several other features that are especially interesting right now, such as crowdfunding, subscriptions, donations, and all of that without fees added. They also have tools to help you sell merch, tickets to your shows, build your email list, and more. They have support 7 days a week. So look, go to bandzoogle.com to start a 30-day free trial. You can use the promo code ROBONZO to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO. Let's do the show. Welcome, my sweet salamanders. This is Robonzo. On this podcast, The Unstarving Musician, I have conversation with independent musicians and music industry pros to discuss the various aspects of independent music artistry and the journey therein. My intent is to help independent music artists do more of what we love, which, of course, is to make more music. If you're listening because you're a fan of my guest for this episode, I believe that you are going to enjoy this conversation. Not too long ago, I was the featured guest on a podcast called Music Business Hacks, which is hosted by Simon Tam. You may know Simon for his band The Slants and his activist work to support diversity, freedom of speech, and to fight bullying. Well, Simon let me grace the airways on his podcast, episode 357. If you've heard him on this podcast, it is the same conversation. We did a split interview in one conversation. But if you've never checked out his podcast, I encourage you to find it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorites. Also, check him out at simontam.org. Hey, do you want to help others find this podcast? You can do so by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. It really does help. The Unstarving Musician podcast is made possible through the generosity of listeners like you. One of the easiest ways to offer support is to join the Unstarving Musician community, and you can do so by going to unstarvingmusician.com and join right there on the homepage. As a member, you'll receive from me tips and lessons you can use in your music journey. And this is not just stuff coming from me and my years of experience as a gigging musician, but also from the hundreds of other musicians I've talked to as part of this project and podcast. You'll also get a free copy of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs ebook. And that is all free just for being part of the community. To learn more about the other ways of offering your support, please visit our sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowdsponsor. My guest in this episode is Danielle Eva Schwob. Her band, Delanila, has a new album called Overloaded, which is coming out soon. It's been delayed because of this stupid COVID-19, but her camp tells me it is coming. I can't wait. Danielle and I spoke on release day for a single recorded for Overloaded. The single is called The Philosopher. You should definitely check that out too. I have to insert a disclaimer here. The day we spoke, I had no internet, so we used my fallback recording process, which involves a service called freeconferencecall.com, which actually works great, but there were other technical issues at play, such as technology sometimes. All that to say, I had to use my best editing trickery to end up with sound quality that you and all my listeners deserve. It's not that bad though, but it's an extra bummer for me, because Danielle is a fascinating artist and this conversation was fascinating. We got through it though, and we had a good time with it. She's an accomplished musician, composer, and quite studied in music arts. We touched on some great topics, including bits of her career leading up to her new album. Our discussion also includes lessons she's learned throughout her career, confronting limitations, competitiveness in music, both the good and bad aspects of it, creating opportunities, and the social media age. Find Delanila on Instagram at Delanila, Delanila. You can see everything Danielle and the band are up to there. All right, here is me and Danielle Eva Schwob.
You have a lot going on, so I really appreciate you spending time with me today, and we're just rolling right now, okay?
Yeah, of course. I'm happy. I'm happy to have been asked. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So before I got all situated with recording, you mentioned that today's release day, and I did notice that The Philosopher is premiering today. You've got a really cool video for it, and you mentioned that you were feeling good about it. Tell me how you feel.
Thank you. I mean, release days are always exciting. You spend such a long time working on these things in a room by yourself or with other people who are in the room with you, and you're doing all of this stuff quietly, and you know what you have going on, but no one else in the world does. So the day when all of that changes and you actually finally start to send work out into the world is pretty deeply gratifying. Just nice to feel like all of the many hours that you put into working on whatever project you're doing have been worth it, and it's just cool to send it out and start to see people reacting to it and liking it, hopefully.
That's nice. Yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
I see that an album, Overloaded, which I presume The Philosopher is going to be part of, comes out on April 3rd.
Yep.
And you've had some other releases. I'm just kind of curious about the timeline during which I think it's two prior releases. I'm just curious about the timeline during which that had occurred.
What do you mean? Just when they were? Or?
Yeah. I'm just kind of trying to gather how much time passed as you were releasing these three and April 3rd coming up.
Gotcha. I actually can't remember when we did the first one. I know that the last single was around the end of November, I think, or mid-November, and the one before that, I think we put our first track out in April, but I would have to check that. So we did, I want to say, the first single in April with a video to follow a few months later, because it took a little while to get the edit together on that one, and then another single in the fall. And we've sort of been drip releasing songs slowly just to kind of test the waters with the project, and also give us a little bit of time to really put plans in place so that when we do the launch, it feels good and it feels like we're ready.
Yeah, great. And I guess to give our listeners some perspective here, so we're recording on February 28th, 2020, and I mentioned April 3rd coming up, so it's not too far away at all. We're almost in February.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, and so all this stuff that you just mentioned happened last year, 2019, so I'm sure it was a fast and furious year for you based on all the other things it looks like you were possibly doing while putting tracks together for Overloaded. So, your body of work is not typical of guests that I've had on the podcast. I'm really curious about where you are today, because it looks like you have taken a sidestep or from what you have been doing. You've been kind of immersed in a world of, I'm going to paraphrase something I read from, I think, your press release, but
sure.
You're kind of stepping out of a world where you've been doing lots of composing. You're very established in this world, and some of the work that you do may get exposed in the form of a concert performed by some elite trio or in a film. And here you are now with an independent thing going on, including a band, and this experimental band, as the press release says. Is this the first time you've done this, and how does it all feel?
I'll try and answer those questions one by one. No, I'm actually glad that you mentioned all of this, because this isn't the first time that I've been whatever we want to call this project, a band thing, a songwriting project. I've actually been doing both composing for sort of more traditional instruments, so things for the concert hall or scores or anything that's more notation based. I've been doing that, but since I was quite young, but I've also been a guitar player. I grew up playing in bands. I studied guitar pretty seriously. And right when I got out of college, I actually gigged around as a session player for a long time. Well, I say a long time, a few years. And I had my own artist project going at that time as well. So for whatever reason, my composing work sort of started to get traction before my band project, for lack of a better word, did. But and so I guess it looks outwardly as though that's what I've been doing exclusively for the past however many years. But really, I've been doing both all along. For whatever reason, I guess I was busier with composing projects for a while and orchestrating and other things that came up along the way in the composing world. But this it's not a new thing. So it may appear to be a lateral move, but it's actually not. It's just one leg catching up with the other, I guess.
Ah, well, cool. So I imagine it reads cool in a press release. So, sorry, Zoe. And I do want to talk about Zoe and Sax and Co. a little later in the conversation.
Sure.
But how long has it been approximately since the composing type work got traction and as you said, and kind of became a big part of your career?
Sure. So I guess I started studying composition formally when I was around 19, because before that I was very focused on guitar, and I actually thought that I was really going to be a session player, and that was just what I was going to do with my life. I always had aspirations to compose, but I thought that was something that was going to happen later. Mm-hmm. So ended up transferring to the composition department because I figured that was something that I was also really interested in doing, and just loved it so much more. I mean, I still love playing guitar, but being in charge of the bigger picture and actually being able to kind of really have some real creative control over what not just your instrument but the other instruments are doing, that wound up being a way better fit for me. So I guess I wrote my first concert piece when I was about 19, and just started developing working relationships with players while I was in school. And then when I got out of university, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or how to meet people or how to get work or get commissions or anything like that. And so I started my own performing ensemble / concert series, which was called Syzygy, and I just used to put on events with my work and then other composers' work and other players, and then eventually that sort of snowballed into larger projects, and it started getting some press, and I guess it all kind of went from there. And then eventually I decided that group became a lot of work to run, and I was getting commissions for my own projects, and also had started doing orchestration work for other jobs and other bits and pieces that would come up. And so I decided that it had sort of served its purpose and was a moment in time that felt as though it had come to its logical conclusion, I guess. And so, or not even logical conclusion, just it didn't really feel like something that I wanted to do anymore. So and I guess I started getting I started applying for grants around that time, and I won some awards, and just everything went from there. It's funny, it's always so hard. I talk about this a lot with other musician friends. It's just so hard none of us really have linear careers in the way that someone who goes through has a regular office job and kind of works their way up the ladder in that very straightforward way. And so it's always funny to look back and be like, I'm not actually quite sure how I got here, but I think it was I think it was all of this somehow. It was just one thing and then another thing, and then here we are. So yeah.
Yeah, I've heard this before from maybe an artist who in a way has a similar trajectory, because he was doing a lot of production work, and at the time I spoke with him, he was releasing his own work. For him, I think it was more of a first-time deal, but he's was a long-time musician. However, I think I had a similar question, and yeah, he had a little like you said, it wasn't linear, I guess, and at the time he didn't put it that way, but he did say, yeah, it's kind of hard to say when or why it all happened. But it's very interesting to me that it sounds like by creating your own events, creating your own work or gigs, as I like to say to other musicians, that you started to get noticed, and that notoriety probably afforded you connections and introductions to people, which helped you move from a prior state, which you had said you didn't know what you were doing, to one where you kind of had maybe some people around you to help you navigate what you could be doing. Is that accurate?
Yes, definitely. It took a long time, though, to find a team that I wanted to work with and like-minded collaborators and all of that. So it was a lot of trial and error, I guess, over the years.
When you think about that, finding the right people over the years, are there any lessons that pop into mind that, things that you learned if you were talking to, like, I haven't asked you how old you are, but let's just assume you could look back and talk to your 19-year-old self, and or whenever that stuff started, and you were kind of trying to find people who were like-minded and could maybe it could help you move forward, but you could move forward with, maybe help them. But are there some lessons that came away over the years in doing that?
Oh, so many. Where do we even start with that? I mean, I think first and foremost, just whatever you're doing, regardless of whether it's a project that you're really excited about and feel is hugely creatively fulfilling and like an exciting professional opportunity, or whether it's just some tiny little thing that you don't think is going to go anywhere. Just show up and be nice to everyone and be happy to be there and do the best job that you can, because you never know where people are going to go in their careers, and you never know where you're going to go. And oftentimes, musicians' lives, as we were talking about previously, take sort of winding, circuitous routes towards success, and however you define that. And you don't always know who's going where. So be nice to everyone, be prepared, show up and do a good job, and just try and do everything to the best of your capabilities. So that, I'd say also, for me, a balance of, there's something to be said both for reaching out to people who are further ahead in their careers, who might be able to help you, who are maybe have similar creative inclinations and are like an aesthetic that you aspire to. So reach out to people who are be shameless in, well, not shameless is the wrong word, but be proactive in reaching out to people whose work you admire, who are further up the ladder, but also really build relationships with other artists who are on their way up, because that's how scenes form. And when I was in university, one of the things that they told me that really stuck is that look around the room and see the people that you're studying with, all these other like-minded individuals who are trying to build something creative and who are trying to forge careers in this very crazy world that we've all decided to be in. And those are the people those are your future colleagues. Like, those are the people who, if they stay in the industry, you're going to see for the next 20, 30 years. So, build relationships with people who are on their way up and people who are further up, and they're both equally valuable for different reasons. What else? I think also, this could be an entire podcast in itself. Right. I think also be really deliberate about the kind of career that you want to have, because it's important to say yes to everything, and especially early on when you're just kind of starting to get your feet wet, to just say yes to everything, work with as many people as you can, and do whatever projects come along. Like, that's great, and that will certainly lead somewhere. But if you have aspirations to, like, a specific idea in mind for what kind of aesthetic you want to pursue or build within your own creative world, if you have like very specific goals and artists that you want to emulate, make those opportunities for yourself, like we were talking about before, because people won't know people won't know to hire you unless you've already proven to them who you are. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, good. Just try and make the work that you want to make and put it out and let people see what you're doing. Don't wait for stuff to come to you, because it won't. And oftentimes the things that just kind of land in your lap can lead you down other professional or creative avenues, which is cool, and you learn a lot by doing that, but it won't necessarily get you where you want to go specifically.
Sure. No, it's great. And interesting. Before I forget, earlier the internet did something weird, which it's been doing to me all week. But
doesn't it? Aren't most of the things that the internet does weird?
Right. You were talking about a time during which you were unable to play, but I missed what had happened.
Oh, I had no one ever really gave it an official diagnosis. It was just some kind of tendinitis, repetitive stress, carpal tunnel kind of thing, and I had my wrist was in a splint for a while, and I had a really terrible, at the time it seemed like bad luck, but in hindsight it was actually kind of fortuitous, but I had a really bad physical therapist who gave me a lot of terrible advice and didn't really give me the proper exercises to do, so I was in a splint for way longer than I should be. And by the time I went to someone who knew what they were doing and took it off and actually tried to use my hand again, it hurt to even hold a phone. It was really terrible.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, so what were you able to do during that time? Was that a bit of a halt to what you were working on, or were you able to do some other things?
That was when I really started composing.
The composing, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what else I did during that time. I think I tried to play sometimes, but I tried to play a little, but I don't think I was able to do very much. It was a strange. It was a lot of hurry up and wait. You know, I got to university and thought I was going to do all of this.
Yeah. Where did you go to university? Where did you study guitar?
I studied guitar privately while I was doing other things at NYU. So what I did was I started off actually in the Clive Davis department at NYU, and then was taking guitar lessons privately with one of their guitar teachers. And I thought that I wanted to transfer into the performance program for jazz actually, and then this happened, and I wound up switching to the composition department.
Hence,
so yeah, I sampled various dishes of the NYU buffet, I guess, and then I actually started a master's degree at Manhattan School of Music for composition, but I wound up not finishing because I was working a lot, and graduate school is very expensive, and I didn't think that I wanted to teach, so I left.
Well, for those listening, and as a podcaster I listen to quite often says to his guests, feel free to fact check me, because I'm reading this probably again from a press release or your website, but to give people perspective on your work, which I presume is largely the composition facet of it, it's been featured by hold on a second, I think something's by Lincoln Center, National Sawdust, BRIC Celebrate Brooklyn, Chamber Music America, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the, I don't know if they say the MATA or MATA Festival, and
yes,
a lot of others. And you've garnered a lot of honors from a number of organizations that many musicians would recognize. So,
I'm not sure I've actually had stuff performed at National Sawdust, but everything else. I've done other things with them, but yeah.
I'm saying good that I said feel free to fact check. And then there's some other cool stuff here, and I have to ask you about one of them because I was just like, oh, what is that? So you were a Sundance Composers Lab Fellow.
Yes.
Yeah, what is that?
Oh, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. The Sundance Institute runs these developmental, for lack of a better word, programs for artists across various disciplines. So film composers, producers, directors, writers. I think they have some theater programs as well. And so they bring you out. All of these programs are different, so depending, I don't know what goes on in the producer's one or the director's one, but the one that I was involved with is the film music program. And so for that one, they flew us all out to the Skywalker Ranch in, I think it is in California. It's just outside of San Francisco.
County, I think, right?
Yeah,
or Marin County.
I don't know why it took me a second to remember where I was, but yeah, it was Marin County. Lots of vineyards, beautiful sunshine, spectacular rolling hills. So yeah, it's fairly competitive, and they picked 6 composers that year. I don't know how many they do now, but so 6 of us went out to the Skywalker Ranch, and you work with some of the best composers who are working in Hollywood on sort of various projects that they assign, and then they also pair you with one of the directors who's come through their labs, and a sound designer from the Skywalker team, and you all sort of work together on these various creative undertakings. So you're spending a lot of time writing in your room, and then everyone gets together and you screen things in there. I forget what the name of the room in there is. They have this it's one of the best, just from a technological standpoint, one of the best theaters in the world. And you screen stuff in there every few days, and then you do a recording session with an orchestra at the end, and drink a lot of wine and stay up late and then wake up early. And it's a little bit like composer boot camp crossed with a reality TV show, except no one gets eliminated.
It sounds very cool. You mentioned...
It was fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned, well, a couple things. You started with, that was the best thing ever. So what did you mean by that? How was it? Was it just the experience, or was it something else beyond that?
It was a bunch of things. It was a pivotal time for me creatively. I really just learned. I had quite a lot of creative breakthroughs when I was up there, and I felt like I kind of got through broke through some things that had been walls previously. There'd been a wall previously in my work, and I felt like I was finally able to get past it. So there was that. Also, just a lot of the sort of lessons that we all took away from that were really have really stuck with me. But when we showed up the first day, one of the things they told us is that we should be using this time to really try to do things that we didn't know how to do and try to fail. And what they meant by that was that, when you're working on a recording project or a commission or something that has a deadline, or you're working under someone, like a director or another composer that you're working for, or on someone else's theater production or whatever, you don't, it's always easy to play it safe and do something that will work because there isn't much time, or there's a paycheck attached, so you don't want to try something and it doesn't work, and then you deliver it and people are like, what the hell have you done? But they told us there's no commercial entity or anything attached or interest attached to the work that you're doing here. So try stuff that you wouldn't usually try, and if you screw it up, it doesn't matter because it really doesn't matter. So this is a chance for you to really try and push yourselves, and you have the support of a fantastic team from a tech standpoint, and then you also have these amazing mentor figures who are giving you input on your work. And so I learned from that, I guess, that for the most part, if you have an idea that seems a little out there, and you're not quite sure if you can pull it off, like 9 times out of 10, you actually can. It's just a question of really sitting down and really persevering with it and working with it and trying to push it to go somewhere, I guess. So mostly my instincts, I think, are right. Sometimes they're wrong, but it's good to try and do stuff that you don't know what to do. So don't know how to do. Sorry. So that, and then also just the people that were part of the labs. It was 6 of us composers, and then a whole lot of other people who are, the mentor figures or the tech people or other people from the Sundance world. Just a really incredibly accomplished and smart and interesting group of people. And the 6 of us, it was such a bonding experience because it's so intense. And we're all still in touch, and they're just some of my favorite people and most respected colleagues.
Wow. You mentioned you had entered into that whole thing with a bit of a creative wall you were going through, and that the experience helped you through that. And
yes.
The answer to this question maybe is embedded in something you already said, but why was that? Why did that change?
Why was I hitting a wall?
Yeah, why did you actually come out of it? I can probably guess why, because it's common, so common among artists and anyone creative that you'll kind of hit this whatever writer's block or wall. But what is it about that experience? Was there something specific about it that pulled you through that?
So you mean like what was the wall, or how did I get past the wall?
How'd you get past it? Yeah.
How did I get past it? I think it was just literally being forced to sit down every day and confront my own limitations in a dark studio. Actually, my studio wasn't even that dark. It had a window and a view of trees, and yeah, it was lovely. I mean, I wish I could work up there every day. It was really just kind of a sink or swim moment where you knew that you had to show. You knew you were going to have something to show in a couple of days, and you knew that the other people who were in the program with you, the other composers, were going to have something great, and so you just have to figure it out. So it was that. It was a necessity, not wanting to show up the next few days with something that wasn't up to par. But really, it was sort of a deeper, more. It was deeper than that. It was just the sit down, show up. Not that I wasn't doing that before, but just stick with your ideas and continue to keep working through it. And I think I was just forced to get past the wall. I think that was what it was. Mm-hmm. There was no alternative.
Do artists ever talk to you or ask you about creative walls?
No, but I'm suddenly very interested in thinking about them. I guess people don't tend to. I wish that people talked a little more in general about things that they struggle with, because I feel like in the music world, everyone is so likes to put this sort of successful, confident face forward, and of course that's important too, because you need to do that for various professional reasons. But I think it's a lot more interesting when people talk about the stuff that they're kind of reckoning with creatively and trying to push through. But people don't do that. People like to pretend that they have it all figured out. So I guess people don't really ask me about creative walls very much, but I wish they did.
I've had a number of guests talk about it here, and I don't know if it's the the format, my questions, or just fortuitous timing, because I think it's a great topic to explore. I mean, I certainly try to be very public about it with my own endeavors and demons. so, and I listen to I speak with a lot of very talented artists, and it's always surprising. Well, it's not surprising, but I imagine it's surprising for some people to listen to a certain artist and go, that person struggles with creativity, because everyone thinks, or we all tend to often think that, nobody can relate to our problems, including creative difficulties.
Yeah.
It is a good topic. So.
I think so too, because we all, occasionally, obviously, you get these things these pieces that are songs or productions or whatever that just kind of write themselves and tumble out of you, and you hope for those. But it's a lot of hard work, especially if you're really trying to push yourself, and kind of along the way. I don't know. It's pretty normal for me. Most projects, it's very, very rare that I think something is spectacular and awesome the whole way through. Usually at some point there's something that goes wrong, or I think like, oh, this sucks, or I don't know what to do with it. And it's just persevering, I guess. But I suppose I talk about this stuff with a few close friends. And I've talked about it. Strangely, I've talked about it more with people who are very, very successful. I guess they feel like they have less to prove, and so they can be a little bit more open. But they're often the ones who are vocal about having anxieties about not getting fired from projects and hoping that they don't screw it up and all of that.
Yeah. We should talk about. I think this is a good time to talk about the Instagram age.
Oh God.
And I think what made me decide to go ahead and go there is because we were sitting here talking about how I wish that musicians were a little more, or artists were a little more open about the things that they do struggle with, because we have to put this brave face forward, which is necessary. But it made me think a little bit about the theme for one of your videos. And now, because I did not handily write it down right next to this topic, I'm afraid I'm going to get it wrong as far as the one. But is it Time Slips Away that references this? Okay. Mm-hmm. It's a great theme that you expressed in I guess an interview. There was a little quote on the I believe again on the press page. So well you can fact check me on that too. But anyway, but it's very, very relevant to where we are. And I guess I wanted to ask, why is it important for you right now or so recently to express your sentiments on where we are as a societal culture with the Instagram age? I'll use that again.
That's a big question. Why is it important to talk about this stuff? I mean, I think I suppose I don't feel like this anymore, but there was a period of time when I think all musicians probably, maybe, I don't know, I shouldn't project, maybe they feel like this, maybe they don't, but the process of getting to be a good composer, songwriter, guitar player, musician, producer of any kind, it's a long one, and it's at times quite a lonely one, because you have to spend so much time in a room by yourself, honing your craft, trying to find your voice, just practicing technically, and it's lonely to start off with, and then so for a long time, I guess when I was first starting to put this project together and get both this project and then also the composing side of the work that I do, it was a lot of time in a room by myself. We're talking about hitting walls, and but the thing that's funny about this time, like it's been that way for creative people since people have been creative, I guess. But there's something now about, working on all of that by yourself, while also being surrounded, or being on these digital devices that also give you access to everyone else that you've ever known. So you're kind of interacting with each other's avatars and seeing like highlight reels of other people's lives and successes and thinking, well, how does this compare to mine? And the thing is, like, they're probably looking at your page and thinking the same thing. It's just this weird thing where we all like to put our best faces forward online and act like we have everything so together and smile and take pictures and share our professional successes and everything. But in reality, for me, there was a time when I was sitting in a room being like, why isn't this working? And I just feel like I can't get it together. And that really had a pretty deep impact on me. It wasn't a happy time. And I think that, life doesn't always go the way that people want it to, and it has sort of hills and valleys, and things go well for a while and then they go poorly. And I think like the emotional ramifications of being confronted by, I'm just trying to work this through in my head. It makes you feel crappy sometimes, seeing other people. If you're an ambitious person, I guess it makes you feel sometimes it can make you feel bad if things aren't necessarily going well. And I really wanted to make a record about that, because that's something that I actually have talked about with a lot of other musician friends, this pressure to keep up appearances online while also doing your work. I don't know. I feel like I'm just rambling on on tangents. I'm not sure I want to go down, but
you're good.
This stuff doesn't make people feel great, and
yeah.
I wanted to talk about that because there was a time in life when it really didn't make me feel great, and now I feel much better. But it's a weird time that we live in. Anyway, there's some word salad for you.
Yeah. Was there a little bit of therapy in doing that particular project for you?
No, I don't think so. Well, I guess music is always a place for you to put stuff.
I was just kind of wondering if I don't know what your writing process is and how long that particular project took, but clearly it's something you have given thought to. You talk about it with friends,
yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious if when you were done, if there were any revelations, or it was more just kind of working through some of the thoughts like you were just a moment ago, and trying to dissect it. I want to, if I may, unless you want to keep going down that rabbit hole, I wanted to shift.
Sure.
To the topic.
I'm trying to. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I wanted to shift to the topic of, and we can come back to this Instagram thing too, so if it pops back in your head, feel free. But I wanted to ask you about competitive environments, and the reason I'm asking is I recently had a return guest, a very accomplished blues player in terms of his level of talent and work ethic and lots of other facets, and he recently discovered a scene in Japan. He's toured Japan before, but somewhat recently discovered this whole blues scene there, and when he was talking about it, he's releasing an album around it, and when he was talking about it, he mentioned that one of the things he mentioned about that particular scene is there was no competitiveness. And so it struck me in that moment that he said that, so in California and in Chicago and all these other places, that, and maybe in many parts of Europe where you've traveled, there's this competitive thing in the blues scene, which clearly hasn't bothered him too much, because he's, at least he's, it may bother him more than I realize, but, he's accomplished all these things that he has. But it dawned on me that, like, there was something refreshing about that, and they were playing, the players there who he said were really good, they were just doing it at this time anyway. It's just out of the joy of the genre and community. So I've been thinking about this in music in various genres, but you mentioned I think it was at the Skywalker Ranch, it was a very competitive sort of thing. Has that ever been a theme in your world where you've kind of been in and out of these competitive environments, and has it ever been one, have these competitive environments or situations ever been a thing for you that you ever, like, wished wasn't there, or is it a good thing always?
I think it's a mixed bag. Well, I think being competitive as far as, having other people around who inspire you to raise the caliber of your own work is a great thing. Being around people who are cutthroat and nasty and competitive is not. So I think having colleagues around that inspire you to keep pushing forward, where, a friendly competition, I guess. Like you're all kind of in it for the same reasons, just because you want to make something creative, and you see your colleagues succeed, and then that pushes you to want to continue to climb the ladder, I guess, for lack of a better way of describing it. That's great, and vice versa as well. But being around people who are cutthroat and not supportive. I think like friendly and supportive competition is great. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Anything that's mean-spirited is not, and that doesn't really get anyone anywhere. It just makes it people just wind up miserable. I don't know anyone. The people that I've known who are that way aren't necessarily the happiest people, and they don't really have like close relationships with collaborators or sort of ongoing creative partnerships. I think you've got to be competitive but also nice as well.
Sure, and that becomes a problem too when you find yourself in the situation where you're not developing relationships that could be really enriching your career. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Okay, we're almost out of time, and I feel like I should ask you about Overloaded coming out very soon from the time that we talk. And I just wanted to ask you to share anything that you would personally like to share about the project, and precede it with, again, the videos, the singles that you put out. The videos are super artistic. I love them. The music happens to be has a vibe that I really personally like. But yeah, what do you want to say about Overloaded coming out?
What do I want to say about it?
How are you feeling about it? Anything?
I'm really looking forward to it coming out, which I guess just brings the conversation full circle, that it's something that I've been working on for such a long time, and put so much hard work into, and that so many other colleagues or collaborators, whatever you want to call them, they put a lot of work into it as well, and it's super exciting that it's going to be out in the world soon. And I think it feels like the most sort of consistent and cohesive body of work that I've done, and I think that people will be surprised by it, because it's a thing that I don't know if they've really heard anything from me that's quite like this. Even though I know what's been cooking in the studio for a long time, no one else really does, other than friends that I've played it to.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and I hope it says something, I guess.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing the entire release. So I found a lot of cool places to find you online, but I want to give you the opportunity and challenge to mention one place online where people can find that will point people to just about everything you're doing musically and in your career. Where's the best place for people to do that online?
Well, I mean, ironically, given the subject matter of my record, it's probably, in our previous the conversation earlier, it's probably Instagram, because that's got everything on there. It has music, it has updates as to what I'm doing, and a lot of visuals as well. I
love that.
Yeah, I know. The world we live in.
Yeah.
My manager would find this very funny.
That's great.
It's been a lot of pulling teeth just to get me to be on there, but there it is. It's probably on Instagram. And then, of course, all of the music is all up on Spotify and the videos are on YouTube. But if you want them both, it's all in my feed, I guess, along with links to everything.
Okay. So on Instagram, it's Delanila, so it's Delanila. And all the links will be in the show notes for you kids that are listening. Thanks again for spending time on your Friday with me, and I wish you all the success in the world. There's a ton more we could have talked about, so maybe we'll have another round of this if you have time for me.
Yeah, it's been a good chat, for sure. I'd love to.
Hey, thanks again for listening. If you are loving the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And again, if you're a listener, I consider you a supporter, especially if you shared it with a friend. Thank you. Look for show notes and links to most everything mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening. With a whole lot of gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell. Hey there, one last thing before you go. At the time of this recording, music artists and other creators are facing unusual and uncertain times. I'd like to help out if I can. My contribution is to offer you an opportunity to work with me in a coaching capacity and to only pay what you can afford if you can afford to pay anything at all. Think of it as a virtual tip jar. The point is, I'm here for you if you feel you need the help. There's a bit of a process, but it's pretty simple. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching. There's a button on that page to schedule a 15-minute consult call with me. This is just a call to find out how and if I can help you, and it's also an opportunity for you to find out if you want to work with me and for me to find out if I want to work with you. If we both feel good about it, we'll schedule your sessions, and I'll also answer any questions you have about how it works, including the pay what you want or what you can afford tip jar thing. So go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to learn more. I'll have a limited number of slots, obviously, so if this sounds like something you can use right now, go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to learn more and or to get started. Ciao.